Speak English like a pro. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a young man named Jack. Jack was a very curious person. He loved learning new things, but there was one thing he struggled with: speaking English confidently. In his village, many people only spoke their local language. However, Jack dreamed of traveling the world, making new friends, and learning about different cultures. He knew that to do all this, he needed to speak English like a pro. Every day, Jack would sit under a big tree and listen to the birds singing. He thought about all the wonderful places he wanted to visit: London, New York, Sydney, and the people he wanted to meet. But there was one problem: Jack felt shy when speaking English. He knew a few words and phrases, but when he tried to have a conversation, he would freeze. His heart would race, and he couldn't find the right words. One day, Jack decided to change his life. He said to himself, "I want to speak English like a pro, and I will not give up until I do." With this new determination, Jack began his journey. Default text: Jack went to his local market and bought a notebook. "This will be my English book," he said proudly. Every morning, he would sit under the tree with his notebook and learn 5 new English words. He would write them down and repeat them over and over. He started with simple words like hello, goodbye, please, and thank you. As the days went by, Jack's notebook began to fill with more words. One day, while Jack was practicing, an old man named Mr. Smith walked by. Mr. Smith was a retired English teacher who had traveled the world. He saw Jack sitting under the tree, repeating English words aloud. "Hello, young man," Mr. Smith said with a warm smile. "I see you are learning English." Jack looked up and smiled back. "Yes, sir. I want to speak English like a pro, but it's hard. I don't know if I can do it." Mr. Smith sat down beside Jack. "Of course, you can. I've seen many people learn English, and do you know what they all had in common?" Jack shook his head. "They never gave up," Mr. Smith said. "Learning a language takes time and practice. But the most important thing is to speak without fear. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, that's how you learn." Jack felt inspired. "Thank you, Mr. Smith. I will practice every day." Mr. Smith nodded. "Good, but remember, learning English isn't just about studying words. You need to listen, speak, read, and write. Find ways to make it fun. Watch movies in English, listen to songs, or even talk to yourself in English. You'll improve faster than you think." From that day on, Jack's routine changed. He started watching English videos on his phone. He listened to English music while walking in the village. He even began talking to himself in English when no one was around. Sometimes he would pretend he was giving a speech in English to a large audience. Other times, he would imagine he was ordering food at a restaurant in London. One evening, as Jack was walking through the village, he met a group of tourists. They were from England and were visiting the village to learn about its culture. They were lost and needed directions to their hotel. Jack's heart raced. This was his chance. He felt nervous, but he remembered what Mr. Smith had said: "Speak without fear." Taking a deep breath, Jack walked up to the group. "Hello, can I help you?" The tourists looked relieved. "Yes, thank you. We're trying to find our hotel, but we don't know the way." Jack smiled and spoke slowly. "Go straight down this road. Then turn left at the big tree. You will see the hotel on your right." The tourists thanked him and continued on their way. Jack stood there for a moment, feeling proud. He had done it. He had spoken English to real people, and they understood him. From that moment on, Jack knew he was on the right path. He continued to practice every day, growing more confident with each conversation. And while he wasn't perfect yet, he was determined to keep going. But this was only the beginning of Jack's journey. He still had a lot to learn, and many challenges were waiting for him. Would he truly be able to speak English like a pro? Only time would tell. Jack was more confident now, but his journey to speak English like a pro was far from over. After helping the tourists, he felt motivated, but he knew that real mastery would take more than just a few conversations. Every day, he reminded himself of Mr. Smith's advice, speak without fear. So he kept practicing, speaking out loud whenever he could. One morning, as Jack was sitting under his usual tree, Mr. Smith came by again. "Good morning, Jack. How's your English practice going?" Jack smiled. "It's going well. I talked to some tourists last week. It was scary, but I did it." Mr. Smith chuckled. "That's fantastic. I'm proud of you, but remember, there's more to learning English than just speaking. Have you been listening and reading in English too?" Jack nodded. "Yes, I listen to songs and watch videos. But reading is hard. The words are confusing sometimes." Mr. Smith thought for a moment. "I have an idea. There's an English bookshop in the city, not too far from here. Why don't you visit it? You can find books written in simple English, and they will help you get better." Jack was excited. He had never been to the city before, and the idea of visiting an English bookshop sounded like a fun adventure. So the next day, Jack packed a small bag and set off for the city. As he walked, he repeated English words in his head, thinking about all the things he would say when he arrived. When Jack reached the city, he was amazed by how big it was. There were tall buildings, busy streets, and so many people. He felt a bit nervous, but he reminded himself, speak without fear. After asking for directions in English, Jack found the bookshop. It was a cozy little place with shelves full of books. Inside the shop, a kind lady smiled at him. "Hello, how can I help you today?" Jack took a deep breath. "I'm learning English. Do you have books for beginners?" The lady nodded and led him to a special section filled with simple English books. Jack picked up a book titled The Adventures of Tom. The words were easy to understand, and the pictures made the story even more interesting. He bought the book and decided to read a little every day. Back in the village, Jack's routine changed once again. Now he not only spoke English, but he also read for at least 15 minutes each morning. Slowly, Jack noticed something amazing. The more he read, the more he understood, and the better his speaking became. His confidence grew, and he felt like he was getting closer to his goal of speaking English like a pro. One day, as Jack was reading by the tree, he noticed a group of children watching him. They were curious about what he was doing. "Why are you reading in English, Jack?" one of the children asked. Jack smiled. "I'm learning to speak English like a pro. It's a fun language, and I want to travel the world one day." The children's eyes lit up. "Can you teach us some English too?" Jack hadn't expected this, but he was excited. He had learned so much already, and now he could share his knowledge with others. He started teaching the children simple words and phrases, just like Mr. Smith had taught him. They laughed and practiced together, repeating words and playing language games. As time passed, more people in the village noticed Jack's progress. Soon, adults began asking him for tips on how to improve their English too. Jack became the village's unofficial English teacher. He organized small classes under the big tree where everyone could practice speaking without fear. It wasn't just about learning the language. It was about helping others grow confident, just as he had done. One day, Mr. Smith visited one of Jack's classes. He listened as Jack explained English words to the children with a smile on his face. After the class, Mr. Smith walked over to Jack. "You've come a long way, Jack. I remember when you were too shy to speak even a few words. Now, you're teaching others. You've truly become a pro." Jack felt proud. "Thank you, Mr. Smith. I couldn't have done it without your help, but I'm still learning every day." Mr. Smith nodded. "That's the secret. Even the best English speakers are always learning. There's always something new to discover." Jack smiled. He had learned that speaking English like a pro wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave, practicing daily, and never giving up. He had come a long way from the shy boy who sat under the tree, afraid to speak. Now he was a confident speaker, helping others find their voice too. Years later, Jack did travel the world. He visited London, New York, Sydney, and many other places. He made friends from all over the globe and experienced different cultures, just like he had always dreamed. And no matter where he went, he always remembered his village, Mr. Smith, and the simple words that had started it all: speak without fear.